Okay, Tzarayim Tovim. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. It's a pleasure to welcome back Mark Trencher, Rabbi Mark Trencher. I know he doesn't go by the title of Rabbi, but he does have smicha. And Mark is the founder of Nishma Research. I'm sure people here know that. He conducted many surveys on the Orthodox Jewish world. It's very fascinating, professionally done, of course, from research. And he has background in working for Fortune 200 financial firms. He's taught business statistics at 3 universities. He's very involved in his community in West Hartford, Connecticut. Those were early, small community, very involved, president, the head of the Vada Kashrut, et cetera. And it's always a pleasure. And I really want to thank him. He reached out to us and we reached out to him, but at this time, I did not know that the survey on singles had come out. He reached out to me, he's happy to talk about it, and that's what we're here for today. So, Bakasha, Rabbi Trencher, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rabbi Kelman. So we've done about a dozen surveys. Very often after we do one of our surveys, I get feedback. One of the feedback that I got every now and then was, what about your surveys seem to be primarily talking about married people in the middle ages, and you cover the seniors as well, but you don't really do that much among singles. So we do sometimes in our surveys, we do break out questions between this is what single people said, this is what married people said, but that was actually true. We really have not done that much in singles, and the singles make up about 15 to 20% of the community, so they are sizable. I'm a member of a group named PORAT, P-O-R-A-T. This is the group that was started by Rabbi Yitz Greenberg. And they try to provide services to Schulz. So they did a seminar in late 2021 dealing with how Schulz can help single individuals. And if you go to their website, you can actually get a link, poratonline.org, P-O-R-A-T online.org. So they got a lot of positive feedback, and I got a call from their president, David Schwartz. He called me and said, how would you feel about doing a survey, a really deeper analysis of all the issues that face Orthodox Jewish singles in the community, mainly in the modern Orthodox community? Are they connected? Are they dating? How do they get dates? How do they rate the dating system? What works, what doesn't work? What are their goals in life? What advice do they give to other singles? What advice do they give to their shuls? And I said, David, it's funny you asked me that because I've just been getting a bunch of calls suggesting we do a survey. So we ended up doing a survey about Jewish Orthodox singles. The survey is not in my folder on my computer. It's called Single Survey. That's just so I can find it quickly. The actual title of the survey is Orthodox Jewry, Community Connection, Understanding, and Orthodox Jewish Singles. And the reason why I named it that is because I really wanted to get communal involvement. I wanted to do a survey that parents of singles would respond to also, because I'm going to ask some questions of them. I wanted to do a survey that would not just be a single survey, but it really would reach out to the community. So I decided, really, what do I think about singles? I think that they feel, to some extent, what I hear is that they feel alienated. They don't feel a part of the community. They don't feel like they belong. Yeah, unless you're in a shul, like there are shuls that are like 80% singles. But if you're a single in a typical shul, you're in a minority. Do you get invited out? How are you treated? Are the programs the shul gives right for you? So I decided to back it up and start out with a bunch of questions about, do you feel connected to your community? And I had a hypothesis. My hypothesis was that the singles would have lower connection to their community than the marrieds and than everyone else. And my theory was, if that was the case, that would lead to part 2 of the survey, which was really an exploration, a deeper exploration of the lives of singles. So we did the survey early this year in March. We had about 1,000 people responding, almost 1,000. Normally out of 1,000, I get about 150 singles. We actually got 335 singles because we did reach out to various social media and groups. So it's not the overall survey results are not representative of the community because we do have more singles. So I just want to point that out to you. So we did start with the whole issue. we started with a few questions that we asked back in 2017. Back in 2017, we did a very broad survey of the modern Orthodox community. One of the questions I asked was, I want to get a sense of how important is it to the average modern Orthodox Jew that they are Orthodox? How important is their Orthodox observance as part of their overall life? You know, being everything we are: doctors, lawyers, parents, children's, family people. You know, everything we do in our lives. But we're also Orthodox observant Jews to whatever extent the person is so. And we asked the question: how important is it to you that you're an Orthodox observant Jew, on a scale from 0 to 10, and the average was 8.9. So 8.9 is a really, really high rating. One of the conclusions was that for your average modern Orthodox Jew, the part of them that is an Orthodox observant Jew, that part is a very, very important part of who they are. That's a very important part of who they are. That's a very high rating. And we did ask a question like that. We did ask questions along those lines in this survey as well. You know, in the time of the pandemic, are people happy with are people financially comfortable? About 2/3 said yes. Are people happy with their family life? Close to 80% said yes. Are people happy with their social lives? Here it was a little bit less. Only 29% said they were fully happy. And yes, 2/3 said they were happy with their social life. So not surprisingly, the social life has dropped a little bit during the times of the pandemic. And these are all parts of those questions that we asked about connections. We're getting to the point where we can compare singles to others. Do you feel connected to your overall Jewish community? 45% strongly agreed. 45% said, yeah, I strongly agree. But another 40% said, yeah, I'm somewhat connected. And so people do feel connected. Now, one of the things we found out that's interesting is we were just asking about connections. Are you connected to your community? So, I mean, what the heck is the community? The community used to be, when I was younger, the community was my shul and the school my kids go to, the day school my kids go to, you know, my friends, maybe a rabbi or somebody that I could speak to that was in my community or in Brooklyn, New York, where I grew up. But it was all kind of local, it was all local connection. So we live in the age of the internet. And so we did find out that for most people, the community is primarily still defined as local. You know, 90% plus say their shul is a part of their community. 90% say people in their community, Jewish friends, teachers, religious or communal leaders. 3/4 say other local Jewish organizations are their community. But then there's a whole bunch of entities that are in other locations that people view as part of their community. So half the people said there is a shul somewhere else that I view as part of my Orthodox community. 40% said there's an online Jewish group or program, social media. It might be an educational program like Torah in Motion that attracts people from all over the world, but they view you and people view these online programs as part of their, yes, it's not just something I attend online, but I view it as part of my Jewish community, part of my community, my support system. Social media in general, you know, local, even local non-Orthodox organizations. You know, a school might not be Orthodox, might be a Schechter school, a pluralistic school. It might be a Moshe house, which is not affiliated with the Orthodox denomination, a JCC, a Hillel. But you know, 40% of modern Orthodox Jews view local non-Orthodox organizations as part of their community. So that's interesting. So that has been changed, and I think that's one of the reasons why communal connections remain strong. Maybe a weakening of local because the people go to shul as often, which we'll get to momentarily, but also some of that connection has shifted to other entities. So shul connection. When we asked people in 2017 about going to shul, so for example, 84% said, yes, I go to shul every Shabbat morning, almost every Shabbat, 84%. That's pretty high. When we asked that question this time, that number has dropped to 53%. Just over half of people say they go to shul every Shabbat or almost every Shabbat, and another 12% go only 2 or 3 times a month. But that means that more than a third go, you know, once a month or less or never. People are staying home. People are still nervous. people have gotten used to whatever it is people do at home, whether a couple davens together, and one of them gives the Devar Torah. But I get a sense that some people have gotten comfortable doing that, and with wave after wave of the pandemic, I went to my shul for an ofra, for a young fellow was getting married, and it was really jarring because maybe it was that particular Shabbat, but there was it seemed to me afterwards that it was just a little bit that they had moved a little bit too aggressively into the going back to the old ways of things. So people get nervous. So people are going to shul less often, and you might think that the connection to their shul has weakened. On the other hand, we did a COVID survey in which shuls, and even Haredi shuls, even yeshiva shuls, are doing just a lot of online programs. The percentage, I don't remember the percentage of people who went to their yeshiva shul's lectures was actually pretty high, and people liked it. So the nature of connection is changing, but people still view their orthodoxy as important, and they still feel connected. Do you feel welcomed in your shul? 72% fully agreed, more than 90% agreed. Does your shul care about you? 50% fully agreed, 80% total agreed. More than 54% have good relationships with their shul rabbi or rebbitzin or rabbinit, and 70% plus agree more or less. The one area that dropped a little bit was, does your shul have, my shul has programs for people like me, only 38% fully agreed. So on the one hand, part of it has programs in the area of COVID, maybe there are fewer programs. The other part of that question is, my shul has programs for people like me. So we know that people who have stronger Judaic backgrounds are looking for daf yomi. Does the shul provide that? People with less strong Jewish backgrounds, especially over age 55, are looking for programs that are more introductory. Does the shul have programs like that? Young people, does your shul offer programs for people like you? Or maybe the program you want to go to is just a general shul program offered to everybody, and you don't feel invited. So the issue of shul programs was one area where there was a weakness. So we asked all these questions about communal connection. So what I did was, I took 6 different questions about, do you feel connected to your community? Do you feel connected to your shul? And if you go to the report, you can see that we took the 6 questions that relate to how strong your connection is to your Jewish community. And we created something that I gave the fancy name of index. Index is a good word, it's a fancy word. Index of overall communal connection. It's a single number that tells you how strongly you are. I wouldn't apply it to an individual, but I apply it to groups. How strong is that group connected, the people in that group connected overall to the community? And it goes from 0 to 100. So if the number was 0, that means nobody's connected. Nobody feels any connection, any attachment to any aspect of the community. If it's 100, it might be it might be, hopefully, it might be your wife, your family. But if you attach it to a community, it means you're really strongly connected. You're connected to your shul. You feel your shul. You go to shul. You feel your shul cares about you. You go to your community. There are people in your community that you feel connected. 0 to 100. So for all respondents together, mostly modern Orthodox, but some yeshivish, men and women, married and single, Ashkenazic, if you're Sephardic, the overall number ended up being 77%, which is not bad. I mean, that's closer to 100 than it is to 50. So on average, if I had to give it a grade, I would say it's a B plus A minus. People, it's a high number to reach. People do feel connected to their community. What I really wanted to do is look at subgroups. Who feels more connected? Who feels less? Men and women were about the same. You might be interested to know that the Haredi, Yeshivish, and Hasidic were both in the low 80s. Yeshivish and Hasidic people feel more strongly connected to their community than do modern Orthodox people feel connected to their community. We didn't ask them why that is. I can tell you that the Yeshivish and Hasidic people I know go to shul 3 times a day. My brother is he's not listening, but I'll say he's a more serious Jew than I am. I asked him to categorize himself. He said he's modern Orthodox, but he's really yeshivish. So he goes to shul like the mailman. Neither rain nor wind or anything keep him from going to shul. And so he maybe feels more connected to his shul than I do to my shul, which I might go to 1 or 2 or 3 times a week. He goes to Daf Yomi. So again, that's another reason why he might feel more connected to his community in terms of learning than a person like myself who learns 1 or 2 a week over the phone with a chavrusa, with a learning partner. So yeah, it was interesting that the Haredi people feel more connected. We did find the connection goes up with age. Once you're over age 80, people feel more connected. The second lowest group of all the groups we looked at were LGBTQ, were in the low 70s. And the lowest group, the one that didn't reach the 70 was single people at 69%. Now, what can I say about 69%? It's not horrible. It's not horrible. It doesn't mean that they're alienated. It means that there's a connection, but it's a weaker connection. On a scale 69, for example, that's 6.9 out of 10. Is that a good rating? If any of you go to the Internet Movie Database and look for a movie that's like 6.9, and you pick that movie out of 10, that's a list of every movie ever made, and you watch that movie, they'll say, yeah, it was okay, it wasn't bad. I don't feel horrible that I wasted a night watching this movie, but it's forgettable. So 6.9 is the rating. Marrieds rated 81%. So that 12% difference, married people had felt an 81% connection, single people 69%. That was the biggest difference when we spliced the group into its 2 components. So that kind of confirmed that single people do feel less strongly connected. I felt if you go to my report, that is the last slide in section 1. And then there's a transition which says, now let's dive deeper into the lives of Orthodox singles to see what exactly is going on. So the first thing we found out is that although we got a 69% rating connection, that's communal connection among singles, that drops over time. So looking at women, once the women get to age 30, that kind of plummets. It seems that when we look at women under 30, the rating is in the 70s. That drops down to 60% once they hit 30. So it may be, and we looked at this further, it may be that after age 30, there is frustration, there is anger, and there's certainly a sense of alienation, less connection. That drops at age 30. It also drops for men at around age 40. So the men in their 20s and 30s still have a decent connection rating. When by the time they hit 40, their connection to their community also drops down to about 60%. So for both men, for single men and women, now don't forget, a man who reaches age 40 is still single at age 40, a single male, but the one who was single at age 30 might have gotten married. So as people get married, a lot of people get married in their 30s, they're falling out of this group. So who's remaining behind are people that are less connected and more alienated from the community. So that was an interesting finding. One of the theories we have is that, yeah, and maybe this is more connected to women, the scuttlebutt, what your average person says is, yeah, their goal is to get married. So like my granddaughter who goes to Stern College, the women's branch of Yeshiva University, there's the old joke, what degree you're going for? You're going for the MRS degree. MRS means Mrs. Single people are not focused on getting married. They want to get married, but like all of us, they have a lot of goals. It's much more than just getting married. And when we ask people, what are your top goals? In point of fact, 63% of them listed getting married as one of their top 5 goals. We had a long list and we let them check their top 5. 63% did list getting married. But that means that 37% getting married at this point in their lives was not one of their top goals. The top goals, the top 4 were getting married, Also around 60% were just achieving overall happiness. I just want to be happy. I want to achieve happiness. Similarly, also around 60% was I just want to have I want to grow as a person, personal growth. Those are the top three. And number 4 on the list was I want to achieve financial success, financial stability. So these are some of the top goals. Lower down the list was I want to do religious growth, career. I want to my career. I want to improve my health. Now, we did find differences between men and women. And you might be surprised to learn that is marriage a goal? Men list marriage as their goal more than women. 71% of men said, I want to get married. So maybe they're tired of fast food and microwaving their dinners. I don't know if that's a bad thing to say, but men maybe feel a little bit more isolated and lonely as they get older and single. But 71% of men said marriage is their goal compared to 60% of women. There were 3 other areas where there was some difference between men and women. Men were a little bit more focused on religious growth by about 6%. Men were a little bit more focused on improving their health. And men were more focused on improving their education. On the other hand, there were a number of areas where women listed as their goals more than men. And the differences were pretty large. So women much more often want to achieve overall happiness. 2/3 of women said, I want to achieve overall happiness, compared to a little bit under half of the men. 62% of women said, I want to achieve personal growth, less than 50% of men. Now, perhaps not surprising, 40% of women said, I want to be socially active, I want to help others, less than 30% of men. And 30% of women said, I just want to achieve more calmness. I want to become a more calm person, only 20% of men. So there were differences between men and women. What we also did was we looked at it over age, and we found that there are really some significant differences over age, by age. So, marriage does drop as a goal from like close to 80% to just under 70%. Happiness drops as a goal. Finances are kind of flat over time. Health increases as a goal over time. It goes up. Health increases from 45% to 70% just from ages 25 to 50, which is not surprising. Religion also increases as a goal. People do have a goal of becoming more religious. So it's important to realize, and this is all in the report, it's important to realize that we can't make simple statements about what people's goals are. They vary between men and women, and they also vary over time. I have to figure out how to get this information to some shadchanim that are matchmakers, which we'll talk about, because really this helps us to better understand people are not all the same and they all have different goals, and those goals can change over time. We did talk in the survey about dating. How much dating has been going on? So in the time of the pandemic, the answer to that question is not much at all. We asked people, how much dating are you doing? And 52% said none or close to none. How much dating are you doing currently doing on average? And these are the single people. These are the 335 people who are single. And half of them said, I'm not doing any dating. When we did ask them, so 50% said none or close to none at all. Only about a quarter said once a month or twice a month or 3 times a month or more, at least on a monthly basis. So there's not much dating going on. And we asked people, will your amount of dating change over the next few years? So remember, over the next few years, it means we're coming out of the pandemic. The first choice was will definitely be more active. So I was a little bit surprised that only 21% said that. If you haven't been dating and if things are easing up, would not more people say, yes, I'm ready to date? But apparently only 21% said they will definitely be more active. 33% said I'll probably be more active. So overall, half the people said I haven't been dating much at all, but half the people said, I will be dating more. So that's some hope. Okay. How do people date? How do people get dates? The number one way that over the past 3 years, then I have to remember this is 80% of these people are modern Orthodox, 20% yeshivish. But the number three approach that they've been using is shatchana, matchmakers. That means getting set up by somebody who's setting up people, either professionally. Some people do it. Some people have more elaborate systems with databases. They do it, and they get compensated for it. There are a lot of people who do it just basically as a chesed to help the community. My wife, one of her goals is to do more of that. So a lot of people do it that way. But that was actually number 3 on the list. Only 30% of our respondents said that they've been relying on shatchana matchmakers over the past 2 years. Number 2 on the list was the fact that they go to Jewish community events and gatherings. I guess they might be online, but despite the pandemic. But the number 1 by a pretty wide margin was, and you might not be surprised, maybe I'm surprised because online dating sites and apps did not exist when I was dating. I met my wife by volunteering to give her a ride home from my sister's what do they call it, the engagement shower, and that's how I met her, face to face in the car, just talking to each other. But number 1 was online Jewish dating sites or apps. That was number 1. So I have heard that I know there's a lot of reliance on dating sites in the world in general, but I was a little bit surprised that it was ranked number 1. The number 1 now. When we ask people what approaches do you plan in the next year or two, that actually did fall to number 2 on the list. So thank God, Baruch Hashem, number 1 was Jewish community events and gatherings. Let my shul do an event, let the local JCC do an event. I'm ready to get out there to meet with people face to face. And that's what people say they're going to rely on, number 1 in the years ahead, Jewish communal gatherings. Also, number 2 is the dating sites or apps. And also number 3 is relying on shatchanim and matchmakers. So, and there are other sources people use, but those are the main ones. So, and by the way, I do want to thank Ilana Kelman, because when I spoke the last time, she volunteered to help in this project of doing the survey, and you were really, really instrumental. You gave me a lot of great comments. In particular, the question I'm going to talk about now, we talked about this, and that is the question of what do people look for when they date? What are people looking for in a dating partner? Because in the back of our minds, we always have the question about, are people being too selective, too picky? What are people looking for? And how do they determine whether the person has that? So in the end, we made up, and thank you, Ilana, very much. In the end, we came up with a list of 27 attributes, 27 things you might do. It's a pretty long list. I will just tell you some of the, we asked people how important these are to them. And the number 1 on the list was, we asked gay people, the number 1 option was, this is an absolute must-have. That was the first of the check boxes. The second box was, this is pretty important, and it was somewhat important. So I'm going to look at the first 2 categories, starting with absolute must-have. So thank God, the top items in the absolute must-have are all kind of really relate to the person. So number 1 on the must-have was honesty. I want a person who's honest. And number 2, I want a person who's respectful of others. I heard a podcast recently. I don't remember where it was, but they were talking to I don't remember where it was, but they were talking about dating, and the person who was involved in being a shadchan for many years said the number 1 thing he or she looks for is respect. you meet with the parents of the person you're going out with, or you meet with their friends, you come across as having respect for others. That was number 2. Number 3 was being compassionate and kind. And right behind that was they accept me as I am, which is interesting. Those are, but all of those were in the 70% plus range. And being flexible in terms of attitude, intelligence, their hashkafa, their overall religious worldview and guiding principles, and a feeling of love. All of these things came in at the 40%. All of these were rated by 40% or more of people as absolute must-haves. When you have eight absolute must-haves, maybe it gets a little bit difficult to get them all. Some of the things that some of the things were lower on the list. Their level of religiosity was about a third. Their Jewish knowledge was less than a third. Their secular knowledge was less than a third. Only 8% of people said physical appearance, looks, and attraction are an absolute must-have. Only 8%. I think the percentage is really higher, but I think that's one of those cases where people say, I don't want to look like a shallow person, so they check that. We did compare men to women, and there was only one. So now I'm going to combine absolute must-have and pretty important. So these are the things that were absolute must-haves or pretty important, and 2/3 of all these items were rated 50% or more. Out of all 27 items, 2/3 of them, a majority of people said were absolutely must-haves or pretty important. That leads me to the consideration of whether people are being too picky, which I'll get to. But let me first talk about some differences between men and women. There was only one of all of these 27 that men rated as significantly more important than women. Would anybody like to guess what that is?
Looks.
Yeah, men are shallow, looks. Physical appearance, 67% of men said physical appearance is an absolute must-have or pretty important. 50% of women said that also. So, what can I tell you? There were actually a number of things that women rate as more important. And these include financial situation and income, profession, and ambition. So women, this kind of might be viewed as kind of the traditional what you would expect to some extent. Women also look for someone women look more often for somebody who is generous, respectful, humble, and not bossy. So there are differences, but to me, what I found most interesting was that everything is important. Not everything, but just so many things are important. So many things are important, and does that get in the way? On average, out of the 27 items, if we look at the absolute must-have, your average woman checked off 8 or 9 of them, as these are things that absolutely must-have. Your average male checked off 6 or 7. So that I found that a little bit interesting. So there might be a theory that women are a little bit more selective than men. The difference is not great between 8.5 and 6.5. To me, the fact that on average about 6 or 7 items are being checked off as absolute must-haves is kind of interesting. Okay. The question I asked at the end of the survey was, overall, is the dating system working for you? How do you rate it? So before I get to that, just a few interesting questions we asked. Everyone talks about Shadchana matchmakers. Are they good? Are they bad? Do they know what they're doing? What kind of degree do they have? Do they have an advanced degree in matchmaking? Well, there is actually no such thing. Well, there are some that handle it in a more professional manner than others. The question we asked people is, would you, we asked single people, do you recommend the use of a matchmaker of a shadchan? And interestingly enough, only 22% would not recommend. Between 78% said, yeah. Now, most of them said, I somewhat recommend. Only 10% said they strongly recommend. So in general, singles kind of have some quotes. Sometimes they're good. Sometimes they're good at what they do. And sometimes they do a terrible job and their suggestions don't make sense. These are some verbatim quotes that people gave. Another one said, they do not listen to my needs and only have men who are within the typical frum mold, not anyone creative or deep/free thinkers. So, she may be looking for somebody a little bit different from the mainstream, and her feeling is that the shadchanim are not listening to her. I am Hasidish, being that our community does not socially mix between genders. Introductions are the only way to meet people for the purpose of dating. The shadchanim know how to work the system the right way for optimal results. Okay, so that person needs to rely on shadchanim and has found people who are helpful. Just a couple more real short ones. There's a handful of shadchans that I trust. Most I wouldn't rely on because they never listen. So we heard that comment about listening before, which I find interesting. And finally, in my experience, shadchanim are very good for increasing your pool of contacts. However, if you're out of the box in a way that isn't easily expressed on a shidduch resume, which I'll talk about momentarily, or online profile, that's a potential barrier. So again, we're hearing that the system maybe works for people that are in the mainstream, but for people who are a little bit different from most of their peers, not so much. Additionally, in my experience, the range of Jews that are shadchanim are a certain subset of Orthodox Jews. So if you're not in that subset, using shadchanim may not be a fruitful endeavor. I have found matchmakers across the spectrum, from Hasidish to Yeshivish to modern. So my recommendation to that person would be look a little bit more. There are matchmakers that I think would be a better fit for you. I mentioned the word shidduch resume. So we all know what a resume is. It's something you give to an employer when you want a job. There is something called a shidduch resume, which is a hopefully one page document that summarizes who you are, some information about you, your educational background, and it also, and most importantly, it gives references. So it may give references for people to check up on you, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a couple of minutes. So the assessment of shadchanim is not terrible, not great. Be selective, be smart. If you're a little bit out of the mainstream, personally, look for a shadchan who fits your mold and who is willing to listen. One of the questions that's come up is, we talked about the investigations. People checking up. There seems to be a lot of people checking up with each other, on each other, either before the first date or maybe after. But sometimes people won't even go out on a date until they've investigated the other individual. So we asked the question about, do you feel the amount of pre-dating investigation is appropriate? And about half the people said, yeah, it's appropriate. Among the rest, 40% said there's too much of it. So here again, there's a range of views. Some people feel it's appropriate, some feel it's too much. Only a few feel there's not enough. I can tell you that in the old days, where there was no internet and there were very few shadchanim and there were no online apps, there was less pre-dating investigation. You might ask, you were recommended by a friend and you went out and you saw how it worked. The third question that we looked at before I get to the bottom line of how is the system working out is the comment was made that, these days parents are too involved. The parents are too involved. So I got a resume from a relative of mine. And I got a resume from a relative of mine. And the resume came from this young 28-year-old gentleman's mother. I think the issue of parental involvement, is there too much of it? Is there too little of it? I heard a comment from a very knowledgeable person in the yeshivish community. He said, overall, there's too much. There's a place for it. And he felt that where there's very little parental involvement, people might feel, gee, I wish my parents actually gave me a little bit more advice. And where there's too much involvement, people feel, gee, I wish they wouldn't butt in so much. But we did ask the question about how involved parents should be in their children's dating. And among singles, 47% said, yeah, parents should be involved. Most of them said somewhat involved, only a few said a lot, but almost half said, yeah, my parents should be involved. I want them to be involved. I welcome their involvement, somewhat within reason. Interestingly enough, this is a question that we asked of the married people also. Among married people, more than 2/3 of the marrieds. Now the marrieds again include parents. So we're talking to the singles, and now we're talking to a group that includes the parents of singles. And here 2/3 said, yeah, we should be involved. So that's interesting. But in general, somewhere between a half and 2/3 feel. One of the singles said, in terms of actually screening prospects, I have just seen far too many cases in which the parents are not on the same page with their children, and the children suffer as a result. Perhaps in other communities where they get married much younger, it's necessary. There's a tendency among many, in growing from a child to an adult, often the adult is different from what we thought they would be like, and the adult might be different from the 28-year-old adult may be different from the parent. And so to some extent, the parents need to understand that. And if a parent is involved in that, in the dating life of their child, they need to recognize that at some point they will go off on their own. A parent said emotionally healthy parents are the most natural advocates for their children, other than children who would be resentful. Parents can help the children by providing a relatively more objective voice in all emotionally laden processes. So, a 28-year-old single who recognizes that his or her parent has a lot of life experience and really can be a source of knowledge and assistance, that is actually a good thing if that relationship exists. So the question we asked towards the end of the survey, we asked the question, so how would you rate the Orthodox world's dating system overall on its effectiveness in helping people to find spouses? How do you rate the dating system overall? And again, on a scale of 0 to 10. So would anybody venture a guess as to how single people rated the system overall? You can hold up fingers, and I'll give you a clue. You won't need both hands.
5.
Very good. It's a good guess. Overall, among singles, the average rating among singles was 4.2 out of 10. Now, the question then is 4.2 a good rating? A good rating? I think it's a terrible rating. I mean, in the business world, where these 0 to 10 questions are often asked, you almost never, a business that's 4.2, I mean, maybe it's like the cable companies at their worst, or maybe it's the health insurance companies when the ratings are really low. I went to I like doing this. I went to the Internet Movie Database and said, show me a movie with a rating of 4.2. Up came a movie called, and the title tells you this is garbage, Yoga Hosers. I don't even know what that means. 2 teenage yoga enthusiasts must do battle with an evil presence that is threatening to rise from its underground lair and endanger their major party plans. So, I mean, this sounds like a total loser of a movie that nobody would ever watch, even though it has Johnny Depp. But that kind of is what 4.2 is. It's just really, really not working. It was higher. Singles, marrieds rated the system 5.0. You might say, okay, singles are rating at 4.2 because it's not working for them. So we wouldn't expect them to give it high ratings. They're single, they haven't gotten married. So they're not going to give the system a rating of 9 or 10. Some do, but their rating was 4.2. but married people gave it a rating of 5.0, which is almost as bad. So even married people know that the system is not working. The ratings get worse by age. They're worse for women. So by the time women over the age of 30 or 40 start rating this, the rating is down in the threes, which is absolutely horrible. I mean, that rating would put you like in the list of the 10 worst movies of all time. So yeah, people do not like the ratings, the dating system. They don't think it works. I'm in the process of writing an article about it, really exploring what is it about the system that doesn't work. Some of the things we've talked about, the selectivity, the investigations, not giving people a chance to meet organically face to face. But I will put that article up on my website. I thank my son for giving me a great title for the article. The article will be titled "When Bad Systems Happen to Good People," which is kind of which will attract people because it's a play on words on the famous book "When Bad Things Happen to Good People," which is about how we as Orthodox Jews can cope with tragedy in our lives. But the question is the system bad? I'm going to make the case in the article that there's a place for what we have, but we need to change things. So it'll be called "When Bad Systems Happen to Good People." Finally, so one question, and I do want to leave time for questions. One question I often get asked is, okay, you did a survey, it's great. What next? Is anybody going to do anything with it? So I think in this case of this survey, we do have a plan to really use the results of this survey to effect some changes. At the end of a survey, there were 3 open-ended questions, and we got over 1,000 responses. They're all available online, and I'll be posting the link in the chat box momentarily. I'll tell you what the 3 questions are. 1, what is holding you back from finding a spouse? We asked people, what's holding you back? And they got all kinds of, the answers we mainly got were just, I have difficulties, it's hard for me to meet people, I'm in an odd location, I can't find the right person, something about me or my circumstances. But people have reasons. Something about me makes me less desirable. I have other priorities. The second question we asked is, what advice would you give to those who are dating? And there's some really good advice there about keeping an open mind, not ruling people out too quickly, patience, staying honest but reasonable. Some people commented on things relating to Orthodox, daven, have faith, learn Jewish subjects, keep your faith, keep your mood up. The last open-ended question we asked was, how can Schulz and organizations better address the needs of single individuals? We got a lot of responses. So Porad, which I mentioned as the organization that kind of spurred me to do a survey, they hired a well-known academic, Professor Sylvia Fishman at Brandeis, who I think is probably the leading academic sociologist in the world studying the North American world modern Orthodox community. And she's about to release a kind of an 8-page document, which is really going to be distributed. We're going to be discussing it on June 12th online. It's available free. We're going to have a document circulated to Schulz. The name of the document will be Responding to the Realities of Single Modern Orthodox Jews. It'll really outline a 10-step approach that we think Schulz and organizations should be taking to really address a lot of issues that were raised by the singles in their own voices. We got pages and pages of comments. We've heard from them, and how do we meet their needs? Since it's 2:06, I'd rather leave time for questions and point you to the website where you can get all these documents. On this website, within the next couple of days, we'll have all of the, it already has most of the materials, and Professor Fishman's report, it will have within the next couple of days for sure. let me put that up there. Here we go. Okay, so many, yeah, okay, I'll go through the comments quickly. Many shul rabbis follow Rabbi Soloveitchik, who said, even if an event is secular, if in a sanctuary, there should be separate seating. Kiddushim, weddings, etc., now have separate seating as well. 59 years ago, it was easier to meet. Yeah, there is a lot of separate seating. In my shul, a social event that includes lectures, and that even includes our rabbi's talks that he gave during the week before, during the week of Aseret Shemei Teshuvah. We permit seating together, although it's up to the individual. Some sit in the women's section, and some don't. I spoke at a yeshivish venue, and I said, and I gave the following idea, which I'd love to get reactions. I said, from the time of the chuppah, and now then there's the bedekin, and then the couple goes to the yichud room, and then they come back and take photos. So there's about, or at least a 45-minute gap. I said, I have heard the idea of setting up tables in the open, with chaperones, with shadchanim at the tables, where men and women can go to talk to each other. So we're trying to minimize tznius concerns about yichud and having people be alone. But I think, and even in this yeshivish crowd, people seem to be thinking about it as, maybe it's worth doing, but that's still not at all a common practice. Are there any other?
If anybody wants to speak up, unmute himself, you can. But I will say it's actually, the weddings is many people have advocated that even if they have a mechitza at the wedding for seating, which I assume most people not. But even when they would, at least the single people should be mixed. But
right,
that doesn't happen in the yeshiva world at all. They don't go. They won't go for that.
I've heard this advocated for weddings where there's a mechitza, and carving out this space. Yes, you're right.
Listen, Rav Soloveitchik famously met his wife at a wedding. It's the best place to meet. People are in the right mood. It's they're friends of the Chas and Kala, so obviously they have things in common. It's a great place, but whatever. Unfortunately, that's not done, and I don't know that we're so in the modern Orthodox world. Maybe they sit everybody who knows everybody with each other. I'm not sure, but
I will tell you this: to me, the most remarkable of all the 1,000 comments I read, the most remarkable one that I read in one of the survey questionnaires was a woman said, "I went to a wedding. I'm single. I'm in my 30s. I'm divorced. There was another woman there who I think was a little bit older than me. She was widowed, and they put the two of us at the children's table." And when I sent my comment back to Professor Fishman, I said, "I really am speechless. I don't know what to say about this." And she said, "Well, really what it is just a lack of respect and understanding that except for the fact that this person is not married, this person is as involved and as socially active and as much a member of the community and as intelligent, and is not a child, is an adult. So what are you doing?" So
if nobody else wants to speak up, feel free, but you didn't mean to. This is an unfair question and there is no answer, but what is the solution? Like what steps? You sort of alluded to at the end, but concretely, are schools, do you think anything, camps, I wonder how that plays, lots of people meet at camp, difference between co-eds, modern Orthodox high schools and single sex schools. I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, well, I think,
or let's say the year in Israel, I know they're young still, but
well, yeah, so are there opportunities in high schools and colleges, not necessarily to have mixed classes? So a boys' high school would not have a mixed class, but maybe in addition to Gemara and Jewish history and halacha and nach, maybe there should be something, a part of the education that gets young men and women ready to understand, appreciate, meet with, develop knowledge and social skills so that they feel a little bit, they maybe open their eyes a little bit to what people of the other gender are like. So I don't know. But I mean, in the document that Professor Fisher put together, there are 10 things that we're recommending for Schulz. Our hope is that we do have a plan to get this out to as many Schulz as we can. And we don't have time really for me to read this, but it is in my report.
Can I offer some solutions?
Yes.
Number one, Shul Rabbeim speaking more than once a year. Many of them only speak 0 times a year about helping the singles community. It should, there's at least 50 Shabbosim that they're talking. Why is it only at most once a year that they're talking about helping the singles community? So that's number one. Number two, weekly co-ed events that are not just singles events, but chesed events, doing something for the community, but it happens to be co-ed, for singles. Or it could be not even specifically for singles, it could be for young professionals, but it's a way for singles to meet. I think the bigger issue to me is once these single men and women, but more so the men, once they leave YU and Turo and Yeshiva, who's looking after them? Who's connecting with them? Who's mentoring them? And I think the issue is what happens to them between the ages of 22 and 35. I think we need to have mentors placed in communities around the country that have a lot of singles there. And their goal of the mentor is to reach out to the singles, especially the men, and really be there for them in terms of helping them make sure that they don't go off the derech and helping them make sure that they are prioritizing seeking a spouse. So those are a few of the things that I think that need to be addressed that aren't really being talked about yet.
Can I ask you why you say especially the men? Why is it any different for the women? If anything, I think men have a natural connection. They go to shul, they're shiurim more. So in men, I think it's a little bit easier to maintain ties. But I think a lot of the women, where it's less common for them to go to morning minyan, I think it's much harder for them.
Because I am convinced, I've been setting up singles for 20 years. I'm convinced that many more men go off the derech than women, especially as they reach their upper 20s and into their 30s. There's also many more men who don't prioritize getting married than women versus women. So the issue is making sure that those women have, and also there's more men that have a fear of commitment, more men that care about physical appearance a lot more men that don't have a firm career path, etc. There's a lot of different things. Women don't need that as much as men do on a lot of those items. Now, I'm not saying that they shouldn't be part of this mentoring program that I'm suggesting, but I do think it's a little bit more important for the men.
Okay, interesting. Anybody else? Oh, and then making comments or suggestions or what have you? I don't know if people are afraid to ask or what. Okay. All right. Otherwise, we'll thank you. Like Ilana wrote at the bottom, this is a very important work, and I think everybody has people who they know who are single, whether immediate family or friends. It's I found that interesting. Right at the top of the bat, you said 20% of the Orthodox community are singles. That's what you'd estimate?
Yeah. I mean, the problem with the Orthodox community is you can't you can't really rely on the big surveys like Pew Research to.
Of course.
Yeah, it's a guess. It's a guess.
Okay. It's by the way, I think you discussed find any difference between Bali Tshuva and not how they're impacted. They sort of have a double whammy, if I could use that. Maybe that's not the right expression, but I think there's a little bit. It's harder for them to break in and then add in the singles. I don't know if you have anything to comment about that.
Yeah, in this survey, we did not ask people whether they were Bali Tshuva or not, so we don't know. But we did do a survey on Bali Tshuva back in at the end of 2019. I seem to remember that after a number of years, they feel really the majority of them no longer actually view themselves as Baalei Tshuva, so they kind of fit in. But again, a Shadchanim will definitely might flag that as something of interest.
I mean, I think more in the yeshiva world than the modern Orthodox community. I think it's very rare that in the yeshiva community they marry, FFBs and BTs, if I can use the sort of not whatever the terms, but okay. Last chance, last call, but otherwise, thank you very much, and thank you for coming and presenting, and for all the wonderful work you do, and should grow in many occasions. Everybody contribute a little bit, and hopefully we can go a long way. The Jewish people, in addition to the individual happiness, and we want to help, of course, perhaps that's most important on a communal basis. Of course, this is crucial work. So thank you.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.